Welcome back to Craft and Cocktails. I'm your host, Chris Werner. Today we're sitting down with Alana Billingsley and Kristen Merlino. They're going to walk us through the CMA Awards, highlighting the collaboration between the lighting and scenic departments.
I thought would be most interesting to illustrate specifically our relationship with, in a lot of what we do, particularly on live television, because unlike in scripted where you're telling, you're supporting a character story with a world, we are supporting time creatively. Like the work that we do has to air live, and it has to support almost always, 10 to 20 live music performances. I mean, because primarily the live award shows are about giving out awards for live music or some, there's always some entertainment component. So the spaces have to be really dynamic. And so that means for us, we have to help facilitate the integration of a lot of lighting instruments and a lot of video instruments. I mean, really, it goes hand in hand. So the project that I thought would be fun to talk about today is the most recent CMA Awards set. It was designed by Florian Wieder, and the lighting design was by John Kustner. And we have been involved with the show for a long time, but this was the first complete overhaul of the space. The show happens in the Bridgestone Arena in Nashville. This is an excellent opportunity to see a little bit about how we experience the process of designing a new set. So I'll show you the first creatively approved conceptual design, and then I'll just step you through a couple of key turning points that it took for us to keep the design moving forward so that it could, be practically feasible. So this is what we got, and there's a couple of, beautiful wide shots, some really evocative indication of a lighting rig. You can see clearly that there's, it's a two-stage set with a center awards tunnel area. So functionally, the design has checked the boxes of all the things the producers and the designer have discussed. And this all comes out of Florian Wieder's office. And then he's included a white model. So this white model is an interesting place to start to tell the story of how we interpret a design to make it practical for the run of the evening.
Can you briefly speak to the operation, the use of the stage for people that don't understand there are close downs and setups and act looks?
Stage right and stage left stages are where almost all of the performances throughout the night will occur. And what we often do in the flow of the show is someone will perform on stage right, we will give out an award, or we can go directly to stage left. So at the top of any act, like when we come back from commercial, you can assume that there's a full band set up over here and a full band set up over here. And before we go to the next commercial, we will see one band over here and one band over here. And then in the commercial break, or basically as soon as one of the performances stop, there's a wall, usually an LED wall, upstage. That LED wall will fly out, roll out, track out. In some way, we will open up the stage and we'll change the band over. Meanwhile, you're watching a performance over here, or they're giving out an award dead center, or maybe we're out here at the stage in the middle of the audience. But our attention leaves the stage, and as soon as our attention leaves the stage, that stage is always running, so they're doing a changeover over here. While they're doing that changeover, this would show you both of those stages open. But while we're doing a changeover, these walls downstage, we refer to as the close downs. Those downstage walls are they are masking the changeover happening upstage.
That is a perfect description, thank you.
But first, oh my God, Chris, you're gonna love this. This, I actually should have put this one second. Before we went to this ground plan, when we were still thinking about this one, where there's just a single wall that does two jobs. Essentially, they want the inside to look very clean. So very clean inside of the tunnel. And then when you're on the stage performing, I know, we all know that this side of the wall needs to support a performance. It can't just be super clean. So we were playing with this idea of using mirrors embedded in the structure, right? So here's the center tunnel, and from this view, you would have a very clean architectural series of arches. and you would embed the fixtures here, shoot them at a mirror, and then in theory they would cover the performance stage. We went through this for about a month. We even had a previs company mock up a 3D model with lights in it and had them project what the cones would look like. What we decided, with John and John's team is that, reflected light, while it may provide like coverage, it created far too many complications and limitations in terms of like really responsive, energetic light. Because, looking at the source of a light is like completely different than looking at the reflected glow of the light. And it's just not as exciting. And that's really what you want when you're looking at like a dynamic performance area. You want to see the lights going on and off. I mean, it's almost like the heartbeat of the show. So we abandoned the mirror idea.
I love it so much.
we really talked about it a lot. So we ended up on a ground plan that looked like this. We have our clean award tunnel, and then we have supporting these performance areas, a completely separate set of walls. And then our lighting designer, John, makes some notes and indicates roughly the array. You can see he used a number of different colors to start to talk about the various kinds of fixtures we would have to figure out how to fit into the set. Our job is to translate that into the design plan, the build plan for these pieces. But what this indicates, this is how we formalize, the kind of early conversations where we just say, okay, we know that we need to basically create these ladder rungs. We need vertical lighting positions here. We need some horizontal light pipes here. We need another vertical position inside. We want to conceal it inside the structural ribs so that we're still supporting the architectural look of the original model. I mean, everything we're doing is trying to support the look of that first design sketch, even as we layer in all of this technology. You can see here when you flatten the piece out, you get a sense of, this is the actual, like this lighting plot came to us from the lighting department. And this was the product of, more than a month of back and forth drawings and testing. Another thing we R&D'd is the placement of some sun strips. So this is our vertical position 1 that you'll see called out on our construction drawings. What we test here is, does it work? If we put the pipe in that specific spot and we torque it to lean into the frame, are we going to get the look that we want? Everything is about using this highly disciplined placement of basically, a lot of rental gear to get a very super custom architectural look. When we get to load in, this is the next thing we had to consider was how many pieces do the pieces have to break up into, and how can we make that work with the existing lengths of rental gear. So we decided on a plan. We decided, how far back to set the flares. We decided where we would clamp on the sun strips. And this is some in-process photos of our pre-load-in. So all the scenery is now built. It's all in Nashville. Everything fits on a truck. And we have a pre-call at a separate offsite warehouse where all of this cabling is getting done, and all of these, you can see our sun strips, they've attached them, and now they're getting ready to go through and rotate them all. So that when we get to stage, here they've all come off the truck, and this is all of those rib pieces that are about to get assembled. So they roll onto the stage and they just pick up and clamp together. I say just, it's
easy.
As you can see, they're massive, but all the lights are already assembled, and that is the kind of logistics that, that we try to help facilitate, because we can't just build the structure and then ask somebody to go up in a genie lift and put in each fixture. Like there isn't enough time in the venue for it to go, for it to be practical. So all of the R&D, at least half of the energy goes into making an efficient load-in experience. We were told from the outset that it was going to be their plan was to have a multi-year design. So in addition to building and designing everything with an eye for the first install, we also had to plan for it to be struck and stored in such a way that it will come back at least one more year.
What is the typical team? I know it would change from project to project, but how many folks, how many shoulders are you standing on when presenting this? And then what kind of team do you take on site?
Typically on a show of this scale, if you're talking about, 20 plus live performances, there's a production designer, there's an art director that is, as Alana said, that's responsible for what we refer to as the main set, which is the whole structure that Alana just described, and which is the shell inside which all of the performances happen. So there's, and that person typically takes a supervisory role over any performance that might interface with the rest of that set or environment. And then there's usually, another art director that manages the performances. Sometimes there's a couple of people in that position. As Alana said, maybe there's on some projects, there are two art directors that share the task of managing the performances, sometimes also an assistant art director, usually a production assistant as well. So it's, it's a team of a solid handful of people to put 20 live performances on the air.
With the show's desire to be relevant and topical as the circumstances around the music industry change quickly, what is the timeline for the act books? How early do you get to work on those?
It depends on the show. We normally get together at the beginning of September for a first pass creative conversation to develop concepts that the producers would like to present to the artists that will perform on the show to, and vet those ideas creatively with them. Sometimes that creative is more driven by an artist, current album campaign or something like that. And, sometimes we don't get that information until a couple of weeks before the broadcast. So it can be anywhere from, a couple months, or if an artist has a big idea that they're excited about, sometimes we'll get that information, if we're lucky, 6 weeks before the broadcast. But in a lot of cases, we're developing big concepts very quickly inside a matter of a few weeks.
Can you show us some act looks for this show?
Sure. The one in particular that I have here is a look for the artist Dan and Shay. So this is the initial concept sketch. So what we, in discussing some ideas about what might be an appropriate look for this performance, the creative team envisioned some kind of large, imposing ceiling-like structure that has a scenic quality, but that also has a built-in position for dynamic lighting. So the proposal here is this large circular ceiling unit and this disc-like platform that the artists are standing on that is also rimmed with lighting fixtures underneath. And if it is creatively approved by the artist and their team, that's when it comes back to us and they say, okay, how do we execute this? And the thing to remember about this is that, as Alana said, this mini show is taking place on one of those two performance stages that we showed you earlier. So we're talking about those performances have a physical space of roughly 35 feet by 35 feet, approximately. You're trying to take something like this in the middle of a live broadcast, and how do we bring this in? This structure, for example, is roughly 20 feet in diameter. So how do we take a 20-foot diameter structure and bring it onto this performance stage in the middle of a live show and have it function? It's also worth noting that typically on a show like this, you have roughly 10 to 12 minutes to execute what we call the changeover. So these were some of our initial drawings of the construction, just to simply illustrate the things that we need these pieces of scenery to achieve. We illustrate the structure, we illustrate the size of it, and a rough section view. We want something that is roughly this size. We want some lighting fixtures to hang in between each of these ribs. So then we talk a little bit more in detail about how the piece is really constructed. And in this particular case, the fabrication shop and I shared a number of section drawings back and forth of this particular detail here, because we need to do a couple of things. We need to facilitate mounting our lighting fixtures to the underside of this center sweep of our circle. We also need to facilitate being able to pick it up and rig it easily and effectively. And we also need cable to go somewhere. So our concept is that you would use this center pipe here as our point of contact for rigging. This will allow us to pick it up in a number of places flexibly once it's on site, and we determine exactly where we're going to pick it up from. We know it's probably going to be at least in 4 different places. So this gives us flexibility to get the piece on stage. So at this point now we've cleared a number of hurdles in the development of a typical performance look. We've established what we want the creative look to be. We have done concept drawings to convey to the shops and to our vendors what we want to build. We've had the technical conversations with all of those vendors about how to meet the various logistical parameters of the project. We have also concurrently budgeted the piece. We've gotten prices back. We've submitted a budget to the production team. We've gotten budgetary approval. We've solved the technical challenges. Now all we have to do is build it and put it on stage for the first time.
We don't have to build it.
Right, we don't have to. And so the finished product looks like this. So if we look again at the proposed concept, and then we go back to our final product, that is what we ended up with. In this particular case, going back to the discussion about how we physically move a piece like this on and off stage during a live show, what we ended up doing in this case was we left this 20-foot diameter ceiling unit completely assembled, and we hung it in the air backstage, upstage of those LED walls that Alana was referencing earlier. We left it in the air, hung as one piece, and we built some transfer carts that it landed on top of backstage, and then rolled out onto the performance stage to get picked up again and raked into its performance position. That was not the original plan, and it is important to always remain flexible in this kind of an environment, because often the plan will change.
Join us for some Q&A with Kristen Merlino and Alana Billingsley in part 3. Click that link.